Formula 1 is back at the United States Grand Prix, and today we have got official news on what has been going down with regards to Audi and this entire contract issue that's been going on between themselves and Devon Butler. So it initially started off with Devon Butler saying that Audi breached his contract terms and that things were just going completely sour between the two of them. Devon Butler claimed that he had a 3-year deal with Audi and that Audi decided not to continue with him for his third and final year, breached his contract, and therefore, it needs to be addressed. Now, Audi have actually revealed that Devon Butler was on a 2-year +1 deal with the team. So what the contract is stating is that Devon Butler had a definite 2-year deal with the team with the option to extend for a 3rd year. So it is technically a 3-year deal, however that 3rd and final year can actually be opted to actually be active, or they can deactivate that opportunity for another year with the team. So that's what Audi have now been saying. They say that what Devon Butler has said is completely false. However, with regards to all the financial payout that Devon Butler has not been receiving, Audi will look into that in further detail. However, for the time being, we now know that Audi did not break any clauses against Devon Butler's contract, as he was on a 2-year +1 deal. So in other words, Devon Butler definitely was for Audi for 2 years. However, it didn't mean that they couldn't drop him for the 3rd year. They had that choice whether they wanted to activate a 3rd year with him or whether they didn't want to activate it. And in the end, they didn't want to activate it. So Audi have now asked for no more questions regarding this matter, and that the rest of it is all going to be finished and sorted out internally regarding if any finances were breached, and just do a bit more further investigation. They did say they wanted to just get this out here, right now, that the entire contract with regards to Devon Butler's drive was not actually false, and that they did do everything according to plan within the contract that they made. Now, Red Bull are set to meet with the FIA very soon with regards to the planned change for the ERS management. Red Bull have been very unhappy that the ERS has not been able to have had an extra bit of help due to the fact that the cars are now so much lighter, meaning that harvesting ERS is that much more difficult. So they wanted to meet with the FIA and see if they could try and get a change in there to allow them to use up more battery and to harvest a bit more, basically make the batteries bigger. So far, 3 teams have agreed with Red Bull's plan for change and are backing Red Bull, so therefore at the moment we have 4 teams that are in favour of this plan to help with the ERS, and the other 6 teams have not commented on that just of yet. We don't know which teams are actually following Red Bull yet, and we don't know which teams are not going to follow Red Bull yet. It's all to be said and basically playing the waiting game now until we find out what really is going to happen and which teams agree with them and who doesn't agree, and potentially why don't they. Looking at the race news then heading into this weekend, and the shock of the paddock came from Mercedes-Benz as they dominated practice. They topped the sessions in FP1, FP2 and in FP3. This has come as a surprise to all the teams, as Toto Wolff has stated that no upgrades have been added to their car and is simply just fast. And all of the F1 tech gurus out there did not spot anything new on that Mercedes-Benz. So whether they potentially brought something new in terms of an engine pieces or gearbox or anything like that, that maybe could be a question. But in terms of the outskirts of the car, everything is identical to the first 2 races. So this is going to be a bit of a challenge, and teams do believe it is going to be very hard to beat Mercedes-Benz. Some teams seem to be getting quite close to Mercedes, however, in race trim, but in qualifying trim, it doesn't look like anyone can really get any close to the Black Arrows. Porsche are still not sure why their car is lacking grip on qualifying simulation runs. In terms of their race pace, it's actually very competitive and could well match up with the likes of BMW and Renault. Their problem is, because they're qualifying in the midst of Ford and Aston Martin, they're then having to try and race against them in the early stages of the race. By that time, they already lose too much that it's too difficult to then get onto the back of the other cars. And Renault are happy with their race pace. They think that they can challenge Red Bull for the back end of the points into this race weekend as they try and look to get themselves on the board into this Formula 1 season. But that is it for the race news. That's who seems to be on top or currently struggling this race weekend. But let's see how it all turns out when the lights go out for the United States Grand Prix. Yo, what is going on, guys? It is Foxydude here. Welcome back to another episode of the F1 Journey for you guys today here on the channel. Today we're here for round number 3 of Season 6 here at the US Grand Prix. And hopefully you guys end up enjoying today's episode. If you do, feel free to drop it a like and subscribe if you're new around here as well. And obviously there was no F1 Journey video last week. That was because the previous week before that, this is very complicated now, I was away on holiday. And then by the time I got back, I had less than 24 hours to actually edit the entire thing. and it was just way too much of a hassle. Plus Sam, who helped mix the graphics, was also dying, so he couldn't actually make anything. So we've just postponed it, and it's all ready for this week now. So let's get straight into it then. So my first qualifying lap in this circuit was actually very, very good. We're currently in P4 at the moment. We're going to ride on board now for what was my best lap of the entire weekend and see how we got on. So through turn 1 then, we actually lost a little bit of time, about 6/100ths down. Not too bad though, as we now go through in towards this portion of the track, which is easy flat, literally sticking in 8th gear with these cars, drop it down into 7th, and then initially getting down into 6th gear for the next corner, and then drop it down 1 more gear into 5th. And now as we go through here, you can see getting a very nice exit, and we actually claim back a little bit of the time that we lost on our original best lap there. So not too bad at the moment, as we now break around about 75 meters for this hairpin corner, and now going onto the back straight here, where we can unleash the full power of our Jaguar beast on this straight. Now you can see we're just fractionally up on our best time, and of course the grid is so close this season that any form of time you can find is absolutely critical, as we duck it down now into the hairpin here and find a little bit of time there, about 700ths as we go purple now in the middle sector. We broke a little bit early for the corner, but you can see that we gained back the time on the exit, and now through here this is pretty okay through there, getting a little bit wide, but you can see that we got a horrible run through there on our previous lap, so about 2/10ths up now on our best lap from the first run that we did. Now in second to last corner, we were a little bit wide on our first run when I was making the intro. That's much better. Now braking nice and late down into the last corner here, making the sprint towards the start finish line now. As we come across the line, it is going to be P2 for the US Grand Prix. Here we are then, it is round 3 of the Formula 1 season. We are here for the United States Grand Prix at Austin, Texas, a track which has hosted some very good races since it came onto the calendar back in 2012. It's a nice dry and clear day, so we shouldn't expect to see any of the intermediate or the wet compound tyres need to be used for this event, so we're going to be sticking with the dry compound tyres. The 3.425 mile circuit has got plenty of spots for overtaking, especially on the long back straight, and even in the run towards turn 1 can really help you out. It's a very, very tough and challenging circuit though, with a very high speed first sector, a very high speed middle sector, but then a very slow speed middle sector with the soft, medium and the hard compound tyres obviously being used for this race weekend. Safety car, haven't seen it yet. We could see it this race weekend. You never know though. It's completely random with this series. Now as you can see then, there is Lewis Hamilton getting into his car, as he is the man that is starting this race from pole position. Mercedes' pace coming true as he starts from the front of the grid. We are on the front row alongside of him. Carlos Sainz is in P3 for Ferrari. Nico Rosberg, P4 for Mercedes-Benz, solidifying Mercedes have got some pace. Sam starts the race from P5 ahead of the first Audi car of Sergio Perez in P6. Reese starting in P7 for Ferrari. Disappointing qualifying session for him, but he's in front of the McLaren of Daniel Ricciardo and Charles Leclerc, with George Russell rounding off the top 10 in that Audi car, qualifying in P10. Just outside of the top 10, Verstappen, 11th for BMW Red Bull Racing, and then Bottas for Renault next alongside of him. Then it's the second drivers for both of those teams, with Mason Wood in P13 and Ocon in P14. Pascal Wehrlein qualifies in P15 for Porsche, ahead of Pierre Gasly in P16, with Sebastian Vettel's Aston Martin in P17, with Hulkenberg's Porsche in 18th place. P19 goes to Noah James, and unfortunately for Lando Norris, his qualifying session only left him P20 and at the back of the field for this race weekend. But as you can see then, in just a second, having a look at the strategy then, it's going to be the soft compound tyres onto a set of the hards and a one-stop strategy. Should be able to be done, and we've just got to make sure that we can try and either lead from the front, or if we have to, you know, make up some places, make sure that we make them up quickly. But here we go then. It is time for the US Grand Prix 5. Red lights, and it is lights out. We're going to go here to start the US Grand Prix. Initial slow getaway, but a much better secondary phase of the start. And we open up the ERS now in towards the first corner here, breaking in towards turn 1, but Hamilton breaks much later in towards turn 1 that we did. Gives us a tighter line on towards turn 1, and through we go then. Hamilton leads the field. We're in second place. Sainz, I believe, is still in third. Right on my back now as we go through in towards this first part of the lap, getting a little bit out of shape as we initially try and find our feet here. Hamilton starting to sprint clear now in this US Grand Prix as we get through the end of the first sector here. A little bit of understeer as the car feels so much different as we get the back end a little bit looser. Oversteer on the exit, as I was about to say. The car always feels so much more different in race trim, especially at the start of a Grand Prix, because obviously in qualifying, when you've got absolutely no fuel on board, in these cars, it's such a big difference between qualifying and the race. Probably not as much as maybe you all think, but it's seriously a lot. But onto the straight now here. We are closing back up to Lewis Hamilton now as we start to increase our performance in a straight line. Mercedes do not have the best car in a straight line. So that's something that we can tailor into our advantage as we now go through in towards the end of this second sector. Now into the final sector here. Trying to stay with Lewis Hamilton. Of course, Lewis was very fast in qualifying, as obviously he got pole position. But now, as you can see here, already starting to gap Carlos Sainz in the early phases of this Grand Prix. And that's what I need to do. I need to be focusing on trying to catch Hamilton and put the pressure on him, rather than trying to be under attack and defending from Sainz. Because if I'm under attack and defending from Sainz, that's wide into the last corner. We are going to then just let Hamilton drive off into the distance. And I genuinely don't want that. But that's the first lap of the US Grand Prix done and dusted. And now we're going to try and chase down Lewis Hamilton. But let's have a look at the replay at the start, though, and see what happened. So when the 5 lights went out, our initial reaction was actually not that good. But it was as soon as we got to the secondary phase of the start, you can see here, we've actually got a clean run into turn 1 and in front. But actually broke a little bit too early for turn 1. Hamilton broke nice and late, went right around the outside and maintained track position as we had a tighter line and we couldn't get that exit right. And Sainz is all over the back of us here as we try and fly on through now. On board here with Daniel Ricciardo then, and let's see what Ricciardo was doing on this start here. So he was starting down in P8 if I can remember, but it's a brilliant start for Ricciardo. He gets past Reese and also Sergio Perez instantaneously, challenges Sam in towards turn 1 now, battling here for P5 now in this Grand Prix. And as he tries to get onto the throttle here, Sam though does what Hamilton did, gets a better exit on the outside there, but it's a beautiful start from Daniel Ricciardo. Now this is on board with Lewis Hamilton and how he managed to stay in front of us at the start here. So again, he's automatically going defensive, trying to cover us off now as we go in towards the first corner here. But as we go around in towards turn 1, you can see here, A, I broke too early into the corner, and B, Hamilton instantaneously tightened up my line into turn 1 and didn't give me as much room to work with on the exit, which meant I was kind of in no man's land really for that stage of the attack there. Rejoining back on with us now here on lap 3 of the Grand Prix, and as you can see here, going a little bit deep into the corner, but crucially, we have got DRS now on Lewis Hamilton, so we've managed to do enough to stay in range, which is crucial, because a lot of the times when the guy out front has been out front, we've not really been able to keep up with them. But now, as you can see here, we're getting very close to the back of Lewis Hamilton now, braking a little bit late, braking too late into the hairpin there. I completely missed my braking point and just had to sail off, and I nearly went into the back of Lewis Hamilton. Luckily, I didn't really have to steer out of the corner. I could just let the car just run off and just take it from there. But opportunity missed there for us in this Grand Prix. But now we're going to go on board with the drivers behind, and you can already see how myself and Lewis Hamilton are beginning to pull a gap with the rest of the field, all a little bit of a cluster here, as Nico Rosberg now is chasing down Carlos Sainz here, but he's now going to have to watch behind him, because here comes Sam now, trying to go for an attack here on Rosberg, down in towards the hairpin now. My teammate here very much fancies getting in front of the Mercedes-Benz driver, but unfortunately it's not going to work for him. Rosberg maintains track position and stays in front in the Mercedes-Benz, and it's going to have to wait for another opportunity. And that could just be now here, because Sam is going to once again open up that DRS, but the Jaguar is quicker than Mercedes in a straight line. It's not got as good engine power, but that car, or our Jaguar should I say, has got much less drag on it, but it didn't actually work out for him again. This was the struggles now that Sam was having to face here, that Rosberg has got DRS crucially, and he's getting it off of this man here, Carlos Sainz, who's causing this massive traffic jam. Now Rosberg fancies a run on Carlos Sainz, clearly turns up the motor to 11 here, and now as they go through in towards the hairpin, round the outside, he holds it in there to get the inside line for the next part of the corner. Job done. Rosberg's up into P3, and that's both Mercedes cars now in the podium positions, as we're now right on board here with Sam, who's now 1 lap later going to attack Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari and make his way past, as that Ferrari clearly struggling to get the performance out. And you can see Reese there has actually got in front of Sergio Perez somewhere in there, because obviously Reese was behind him at the start. Maybe he actually got him from the start, but Ricciardo is going to be next to attack. But Sam, crucially then, getting in front of the Ferrari there, of Sainz. On to lap 9 of the Grand Prix now, and nothing was really happening. In fact, I was actually losing pace to Lewis Hamilton. You can see him just up the road there. It was very difficult, and as soon as I saw Lewis Hamilton carry on for another lap, I decided to go in and try and get an undercut on Lewis Hamilton and do something a little bit different in this Grand Prix. Rosberg pits. Sam is my teammate there, staying out. He's got the McLaren there of Ricciardo right on his back, but I needed to do something. As soon as I missed that opportunity to overtake Lewis Hamilton on lap 3, you saw when I went wide, that gap just started to get ever so greater. Not by much, but just by a little bit each and every time. And I had to do something to try and improvise and get back into to Hamilton's DRS window. And unfortunately, I was also overheating my soft compound tyres. They were just getting a little bit too hot. So I decided, best things best, let's get in on a fresh set of hard compound tyres now and try and make an undercut work and get closer to Lewis Hamilton and then re-follow him for the next stage of the race. It's a very tough Grand Prix. Even though I'm not really, attacking or defending, I'm doing everything I can to keep in touch with Lewis Hamilton. And here on lap 11 of the Grand Prix now, Lewis Hamilton has already come in for his pit stop, and he's just in front of us. We've got a yellow flag though in front. We go a little bit wide there into the second to last corner. That's Lewis Hamilton going for the last corner there, just to give you a reference point of how the gap is closing down. But there is someone on this start-finish straight that's got a problem here, and it's an engine blowout, and that's for one of the Red Bulls there. I think that was Mason Wood that had the blowout there, and I am correct. It is Mason Wood that's engine has exploded. That BMW power unit goes up in smokes. There goes Lewis Hamilton to fly on through past the Red Bull driver. We then go through back past that Red Bull car. And disaster there for Mason Wood. Speaking of Red Bull, it's only down to Max Verstappen now to try and get something out of this Grand Prix. Verstappen now is getting very close to the back of Esteban Ocon. Ocon goes defensive to the inside line. Verstappen has to go around the outside in towards this corner. This is just before Mason Wood's engine blew up, because you can see Mason Wood, he's right behind this lot here. And Verstappen does make it through past Esteban Ocon. This is just a little bit further back from the previous clip that we just had. And of course, this was Mason Wood then, who was going to overtake, or did overtake Esteban Ocon, I do believe, and get in front. Actually, no, Mason Wood got in front of Ocon, so this is how Ocon got in front of Wood. So just before Mason Wood retired, actually, him and Ocon, no, this is Bottas, actually, I'm getting everyone mixed up today. Just before Mason Wood retired, he was actually in a very, very good scrap with the Renault cars and his teammate here. So Bottas got the DRS on him, and that bright banana Renault just breezes past him and retakes the position. And then, unfortunately, from then on in, it doesn't go well for Mason Wood, because we saw that his car blew up. So, sorry about that. Not too good for him. Back with the action, though. Reese is now under pressure from the Audi car behind, but he needs to get past Carlos Sainz, because once again, Sainz is causing a big train behind him. As you can see, Sam pulling away now on the hard compound tyres. Reese here is going to go for it down the inside on his teammate here. He makes it stick on Carlos Sainz, but Sainz tries to fight it back, though. He's got the inside line, so he could brake later than Reese. He does so, brakes a little bit later. Tiny bit of contact there between the two Ferrari guys, but Sainz being a bit feisty against his teammate and holds on to the position then. So Sainz not giving it up without a fight, but one lap later, Reese is going to come back at Carlos now and try and give him a run for his money this time. Potentially up the engine power a little bit, maybe use a little bit more ERS to try and attack Sainz. He's going to go for the inside line again here on Carlos Sainz. He goes down the inside, but Sainz does a double lockup. Reese actually locks up himself in towards that corner, but it's enough to keep him in front of Carlos Sainz, and that's the position done for Reese. Now, unfortunately for Carlos Sainz, he's got another man on his tail. It's George Russell in the Audi, who has been a little bit quiet actually in this Grand Prix, although starting from P10 on the grid, certainly made his way back up the order, as now with the DRS here, this should actually be a much simpler overtake for George Russell. He's also going to go to the inside line. Sainz again being heavy on the defense, but again, George Russell goes down the inside, locks up a little bit there. That's going to invite Sainz to do exactly what he did to Reese on the previous lap now. So here comes Sainz to go down the inside, and once again, he says, thank you very much, I'll retake my place back, and doing a good job, I suppose, for Reese in effect, because his defensive driving is really helping out. But here is the DRS now in effect here. Sainz has actually lost the DRS now on his teammate, so now as he goes in towards turn 1 here, George Russell goes nice and late down the inside on the brakes, and we see him move into turn 1, and that is him up ahead. Sainz drops down yet another place. The car really not working for him in this stage of the Grand Prix. Further back, though, down the grid, we can see here that Pierre Gasly now in the Ford having a nice race, but unfortunately, he's about to be caught and passed by the Porsche car here of Nico Hulkenberg, who dives out of the slipstream here and goes down the inside of Pierre Gasly and makes that one stick there. And nice overtake from the Porsche driver, who hopefully should be seeing them further up the order very, very soon. It's a bit sad seeing them all the way down at the back there when there were such promises in pre-season testing. But now back to the action here, and George Russell may have got past Carlos Sainz earlier in the Grand Prix. That doesn't stop Sainz from getting back past George Russell. Down the inside goes Sainz, and really trying to fight this one hard now. He's going to have the outside line, so George Russell is probably going to repay the favour and say no, and completely shove him off the circuit and retain his position. But ever since Russell has got past Sainz, he's not really making that much of an impact. Speaking of making an impact, up at the front, Hamilton still leads the field, but we are slowly but surely trying to gain on Lewis Hamilton. It's such a difficult race for me. I'm trying so hard to get that gap down to Lewis Hamilton.
Ahead, our gap to the car in front is 2.0 seconds. They're on old hards. Their tyres are 7 laps old. The time last lap was a 1 minute 27.7. You're falling back by 1/10 a lap.
And that's literally the margin it is. It's a 1/10 of a second per lap either way between myself and Lewis Hamilton. Either I'm gaining a tenth of a second per lap, or Hamilton's gaining a tenth of a second per lap. But lap 20 now, to start lap 21, that gap looks visibly closer now, as on these hard compound tyres, I feel much more comfortable. I'm using every ounce of performance I've got in this car to really just drag it, as we now come across the line and set a 126.9 new personal best. It's not the fastest lap of the race so far, but it's much closer now to Lewis Hamilton, and that gap is getting very close to going into underneath that 1 second window that we need to get DRS on him and to try and power through as we keep pressing onwards now and hunting Lewis Hamilton down. Lap 22, the skies are getting much darker, but unfortunately my race is getting much brighter, because now we are in that DRS range of Lewis Hamilton. We can now attack him and really give him a run for his money. Also on the minimap, going for the final corner, Sam is catching Rosberg, so both Jaguar cars, we go wide to get it into turn 1. That's not going to help us out, and annoyingly another opportunity is going to go begging here in this US Grand Prix. That might just be the only opportunity that we get, which is a real pain. We have to recompose ourselves and go again on Lewis Hamilton. Now as we blast it through the second to last corner there, you can see once again on the minimap, Rosberg is also trying to defend here. So it seems that on the soft compound tyres, Mercedes-Benz had the edge. On the hard compound tyres, it's the Jaguars that are coming back at them now as we go in towards turn 1. Let's try and actually break nice for turn 1 this time around. We do. Good. So now we just got to get this first sector right, and this is a sector which I'm actually quite happy with. It's a very nice sector for me as we now blast on through to see Hamilton there. Gets a great exit though out of there. But speaking of attacks, I said to you guys that Sam was catching up to Nico Rosberg, and he's now in DRS range here of Nico Rosberg, and he's got a great chance now to try and snatch a podium in this Grand Prix. Sam goes down the outside of Rosberg. Rosberg defends the inside line. Lock up there from Sam in towards the hairpin now. Now Sam's going to have the inside line for this next part of the corner, but Rosberg sticks it in there compared to all the other drives that we've seen. But Sam holds it on in there, but Rosberg comes back at him again now in towards the inside. A little bit of contact there between the two drivers. Very aggressive driving as we now go through into the last sector here. This beautiful right-hander, but Sam does take the position and takes P3 in the US Grand Prix. Beautiful driving from the pair of them, but it is Sam that comes out on top. And with Sam coming out on top, I think it's now about time that I try and come out on top against Lewis Hamilton in this race. Back end sliding a little bit, oversteer now as the rear tyres start to give up in the latter stage of this Grand Prix. Of course, Hamilton, remember, has got 1 lap fresher tyres than I do. I went for the undercut on Lewis Hamilton, but now we're closing in on Lewis Hamilton, getting much closer, braking in towards the hairpin though, not quite close enough. I wanted to do a diving late brake maneuver, but every time I've tried to go late on the brakes today, I've just not got my braking points right. So yes, I probably would in tradition do just a hella dive move and get it over and done with, but my problem is, like I said, I've just not been comfortable on the brakes as we've got a yellow flag now through the first sector here, and I think that's my teammate Sam. I think it is. Yeah, Rosberg goes through, so Sam is out of the US Grand Prix. So after all that hard work from my teammate Sam, he is out of the United States Grand Prix. That is an absolute disaster for us today. Rosberg retakes P3 in this Grand Prix. We're still hunting Lewis Hamilton down, and at this stage, with only 2 laps to go, we might just have to do something crazy here. And Sam here, no smoke coming from the back of the car, so it seems to be some form of mechanical problem, and annoyingly, my teammate has to pull over to the side of the circuit, and that is his race done and dusted. Lap 27 of the Grand Prix now, just 2 more to go, and we are still hunting Lewis Hamilton down. Crucially, fuel is getting back into a nice range here. It's ERS that's a problem now. But this is the section of the circuit where Hamilton seems to just be able to blast it clear. So now we're going to use rich mixture for the whole first sector. Keep as close as we can with Lewis Hamilton. Fly it through here now. Drop it down into 6th very late in towards the corner. Had to upshift into 7th. A little bit of oversteer on the back end. Rear tyres, like I said, really not working with me here. But that's been a nice first sector. It's actually been a personal best for us now. And I was thinking, do I drop it down into standard? Nah, let's just leave it in rich mixture. Let's just give it absolutely everything now as we break it in towards the hairpin here. Let's try and get a clean exit this time around. That's a much cleaner exit now. ERS has been enabled, and we're going to use absolutely everything that we've got left in our car to try and make this move stick here as we now open up the DRS here, and we're going to go towards the inside line now on Lewis Hamilton and down the inside. I didn't even need to go down the inside of Lewis Hamilton. I was able to swipe through into the lead of the US Grand Prix with just 2 to go now in this race. We've managed to leave it very late on Lewis Hamilton, but we've got it done with the fastest middle sector of anybody so far in this race. We go a little bit wide through that corner there, but now we've got to defend against Lewis Hamilton because Hamilton's going to come back at us now in the latter stages of the race. He's hovering all over the back of us now as we go in towards the last corners now. Second to last corner, a little bit wide. Hamilton might just sense that. Look how close he is to the back of us now as we go in towards the last corner here. We've got one of the Aston Martins just up front there, and it wasn't fastest lap from us, unfortunately, but Hamilton here has got DRS, but we're trying to use everything that we've got left. I've really got not much ERS to use. Fuel-wise, though, we are all right on that front, so we've got something to use as a defensive mechanism against Lewis Hamilton. But now into the first sector, let's see how Hamilton fares with the dirty air that's going to be coming from the back of my car, because I've had to deal with his dirty air for the entirety of the race. A little bit more oversteer coming from the back of the car. Personal best first sector, 10th up on what we've done before, but now we've got the Aston Martin car in front of us, and I'd rather it got out of the way, and it just about did there, nearly making some contact. Hamilton, though, crucially, does get away from that car as well, so he is going to get the DRS here on this straight, but crucially, the Jaguar has already got better straight line speed, and we've got 10% of ERS, and I'm going to use every last drop of it to just stay in front of Lewis Hamilton as we breeze now onto this straight. Literally, no more battery left. I've used everything now to try and stay in front here. I'm breaking in towards the hairpin. Hamilton doesn't get in front of us, so now we've just got to keep calm and composed in these final few sections, and we are going to win our first race of Season 6, but we've got to make sure that we get these corners right. So as we can see now, going down in towards this very tricky corner, making that stick, back end sliding a little bit now, and as we go through in towards the last section now, pretty much just flat out corners, so we shouldn't have too much to worry about. Second to last corner here coming up now. That's executed. One more to go in this United States Grand Prix, and we've done that with fine style. It's going to be our first race win of Season 6. It is the victory here at the US Grand Prix, and that was a beautiful race against myself and Lewis Hamilton, and what a brilliant race that we had in store there. As you can see, we win the United States Grand Prix. Also, we managed to get the fastest lap of the race. I believe on the final lap, we managed to steal the fastest lap bonus point there. Lewis Hamilton, he will be absolutely gutted to finish in second place there. 7/10 of a second behind he finished in the end, but he literally led from start to lap 27. He literally led every single lap till we managed to get past him on lap 27 there. So that's heartbreaking for him. Nico Rosberg finishes in P3, but only 17 seconds behind us. Of course, they were all caught up in the Carlos Sainz train. Reese finishes in P4 for Ferrari, so a good race for him, starting from P7, I believe he was. George Russell recovers from P10 to get up to P5 in the race, ahead of Carlos Sainz, who of course will be disappointed with that race. He started in P3, finished in P6, and just seemed to hold everybody up for the entirety of the race. Ricciardo and Leclerc finished in P7 and P8 for McLaren, with Sergio Perez in P9 for Audi, and Verstappen managing to claim that final point for Red Bull. Taking a look at the second half of the table then, a close shave for Renault. P11 and P12 for Bottas and Ocon, getting much closer now to try and score some points in Formula 1. Pascal Wehrlein in P13 for Porsche, doing a great job in the race, just needs to try and see if he can get better qualifying, and you never know, Porsche could be in with a shout of some points. Noah James and Pierre Gasly finishing in P14 and P15 for Ford. A good race for them overall, with Nico Hülkenberg in P16, Lando Norris in P17 ahead of Vettel in 18th place, and unfortunately Sam and Mason Wood were the two cars that DNF'd from today's Grand Prix. But with that being said and done, let's go and have a look at the Drivers' Championship and see how that's changed after a crazy race. And we've got a returning championship leader. George Russell retakes the lead of the Drivers' Championship. He's on 45 points, but we are now on 44 points and just 1 point behind George Russell in the championship. Reese is up to third in the Drivers' Championship on 38 points, with Sam now on 37 points after missing out on crucial points today with that DNF. Daniel Ricciardo and Charles Leclerc are on 34 and 25 points, with Carlos Sainz tied actually with Charles Leclerc on 25 points. Mercedes-Benz now get themselves onto the leaderboard. Lewis Hamilton ups to 8th in the championship now on 19 points. Rosberg also on 19 points. Sergio Perez is 10th in the championship with 14 points for Audi. Now, in the Constructors' Championship, it is Jaguar that lead the way at the top of the championship now, with 81 points to our name, with Ferrari up to second now in the championship on 63 points. Audi and McLaren are both on 59 points each, but Mercedes-Benz take a big haul of points away from this race weekend. They're now up to 38 points, with Red Bull only on 6 points, and then we've still got Renault, Ford, Porsche and Aston Martin that are really going to have to dig down deep if they are to score any points throughout the entirety of the season, with the rest of the field being so quick and crucially so close. But that is it for the Drivers and Constructors Championship, so let's get straight into the post-race notebook and see what the teams and drivers had to say after this US Grand Prix. So taking a look then at what the teams and the drivers have had to say after this United States Grand Prix. Of course, the headline is that Tom left it very late in the race to win the United States Grand Prix after overtaking Lewis Hamilton on lap 27 of 28. And of course, Hamilton had led the race for the entirety of that time, but Tom left it right to the death to make that move stick. Mercedes-Benz are back in business with a double podium finish today with P2 and P3. Mercedes-Benz still claim that they didn't bring any upgrades to their car after their opening 2 rounds, which were very, very poor, and that the track simply just suited them and that they just weren't able to exploit their entire package. Jaguar have confirmed that it was a loss of oil pressure on Sam's car which caused him to retire late on in the race. Sam was running in P3 after overtaking Nico Rosberg late in the Grand Prix, but unfortunately that loss of oil pressure meant that he had to pull over to the side, and that was his race over with. Carlos Sainz was really unhappy with what he called the undrivable Ferrari here today. Sainz did very, very well to qualify in P3 for the United States Grand Prix, but from then on in after the race start, it was all backwards from there as he was constantly looking in his mirrors, defending for the rest of the pack, and also just losing lots of time, and it was something that he was really, really upset with. There wasn't really any reason for him in terms of what truly went wrong. He was probably just in too much anger during the interviews and was just simply unhappy. A man though that was satisfied was George Russell. The championship leader was pleased with his fight back today after he started in P10 and managed to recover up to P5 with some good overtaking, he said, to manage to get his way through the McLarens and also the Ferrari. But that is it for the US Grand Prix. Next time, we're going to be heading over to Montreal for the Canadian Grand Prix, so hopefully you can tune in then, and we'll see how the championship will swing next time around. Take care all. Peace.